Πριν ξεκινήσει το επεισόδιό μας, θα θέλαμε να σας ζητήσουμε μία χάρη. Παρατηρούμε ότι το 73% από εσάς που ακούτε τακτικά το podcast μας δεν είστε εγγεγραμμένοι. Να θυμίσουμε ότι ο πιο εύκολος και δωρεάν τρόπος να υποστηρίξετε αυτό που κάνουμε είναι πατώντας το κουμπί της εγγραφής και το καμπανάκι για να λαμβάνετε τις ειδοποιήσεις μας. In this episode, we are joined by Dr Bart Janssens, Publishing Manager at Brepols Publishers, to talk about getting published while a Byzantinist.
Bart, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
Well, thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning, good morning. We are in three different places, in three different time zones. It's a pleasure to have you here in the podcast with us. And before saying more about what this episode is going to be about, why don't you say a few things to introduce yourself to our audience?
Well, my name is Bart Janssens, and I'm a classicist. I studied Latin and Greek at the universities of Antwerp and Leuven in Belgium. I've always had a preference for Greek over Latin and for Greece over Italy, but that's another matter.
Our Italian friends are not going to like that.
Well, I have to be honest. And you'll understand why I say this as an introduction. For my master thesis, my promoter, Professor Van Deun in Leuven, suggested a Byzantine topic, a Byzantine text from the Comnenian era, which was new to me at that time because I had been trained in, the ancient literatures. And I liked it that much that I continued my studies in Thessaloniki, at the University of Thessaloniki in Greece for a year. And when I came back, I did my PhD with Van Deun again. And I landed in the Christological works of Saint Maximus the Confessor. So let's say truly Byzantine topic. And that's what I thought I was going to do for the rest of my life, my career. But then there was a career switch after a short period in secondary education. I was hired by Brepols, but they needed someone for the critical edition of medieval Latin texts. So after a long detour via Greece and Byzantium, I ended in the Latin West again. But of course, the Greek element never left me, and I'm still fascinated by it. And at Brepols, I've been trying to develop this Byzantine studies sector more since I've joined, so for the past 20 years now.
It's obvious then that we're gonna talk about Brepols and what is it Brepols, because I think it's the chance to discuss what is its work and what it has to offer both to scholars and academia. So tell us about Brepols.
Well, Brepols today is an international academic publishing house in the humanities. That's the mission statement in brief. Brepols as a company has a much longer history. I'm not going to lose myself in details and ancient histories, but the company has been founded before 1800. It's always been a printing house and a publishing house, but it's not always been producing academic books. That only came from the mid-20th century, more or less, when Brepols became the publisher of a series called Corpus Christianorum. Now, Corpus Christianorum started as a series of Latin critical editions of Christian texts, patristic first, medieval later. But in the course of the past decades, Byzantine texts, or Greek texts, entered the program, and many others as well. In the beginning, the Corpus Christianorum was an independent enterprise, and Brepols was the publishing house. That was the agreement. But more and more, the operation, the preparation of the editions, the whole machinery was integrated with the existing publishing house Brepols, and that marked the transition of Brepols from a religious publisher, which we were up until, let's say, the mid-20th century, towards a 100% academic publisher today. We've started with the Series Latina of the Corpus Christianorum. We've started with the Latin West, with Latin patristics, and later the Latin Western Middle Ages, let's say. But since, well, again, the past 30 years maybe, we've expanded in both directions. We've gone back to antiquity and late antiquity, and we've expanded beyond the Middle Ages into early modern and even modern periods. And obviously we've moved away. We still do the text critical work, still is at the very basis of what Brepols means, but we've combined it with many other fields and disciplines, and about which I'm sure we will talk when we discuss Byzantium in more detail. But it all started from that nucleus. By coincidence, we are in Belgium, but we cater for the international market.
I think we have to talk a lot about publishing processes. So let's begin by explaining the step-by-step overview of the publishing process, how from the manuscript form we end up in a publication.
Well, even before that, I think there's two ways in which books or book projects arrive at Brepols. Either, as you suggest, an author contacts us because he or she knows that Brepols might be a good place for their work, or, and that also happens, we identify projects, authors, conferences. We go there, we go out, and we see what's happening in the world, and we ask people, we invite people to submit their work to Brepols. Now, the result, if all goes well, the result is indeed that a proposal is received, a formal proposal, which can come in after some communications, after some meetings sometimes. A formal proposal comes in, and then again, there's two possibilities. Either we identify a series and we know who to contact at the series board to evaluate this proposal, or we think it's an interesting proposal, but we don't see the immediate obvious place for it. And in that second case, we will discuss it at our 3 monthly editorial meetings at headquarters in Turnhout in Belgium, among colleagues of different fields, doing different things, having different views on scholarship, and we commonly decide if and where this or that proposal could find its place. In the end, we always want to place a proposal within the context of an existing series, because of course all of us are trained historians, philologists, archaeologists, art historians, etc. But of course, we are no active academics ourselves. We are an academic publishing house, but we are independent from any existing academic institution. We are not linked to any university, for example, which means that, of course, for the academic aspect of our publications, we need to rely on proper academics, on people working at universities or institutes of higher education in Europe and the rest of the world. It's these people who direct the series or the journals or the databases we are working with, we are distributing, and it's them we have then to convince to accept a proposal in their series. That's the first part of our work, I would say. After that, it's up to the academic community, peer review, evaluation, going back and forth. Before, in a next stadium, the manuscript, the accepted manuscript, arrives back at Brepols for the actual pre-production and publication process. This involves a number of technical aspects, as you can imagine. Manuscripts checks, harmonizations, making things uniform with house style, with the series template and other things. If we're talking about digital publications, of course, the technology behind it needs to be in line with the other products we offer on our platforms, etc. We call this technical editing. This includes a long list of items to be verified, to be checked, to be prepared for further steps down the road. The result of that will be a first, what we call pre-proof, pre-typeset proof, which is the same manuscript again, returned to the author, but cleaned up, so to speak, prepared, checked, verified for their final additions, corrections, anything is possible in that stadium because it's still a Word file. And you'll see the importance of that when I continue. When that comes back, we at the publishing house consider the manuscript to be final, not from a contents point of view, but from a formal point of view. This is what's going to be printed or published online. From that moment on, we start the actual typesetting, which results in a proof. Used to be paper proofs, nowadays mostly PDF proofs, where all the formal typesetting and formatting is applied to the final text of the author. That returns to the author or to the journal editor or to whoever is in charge of the final publication for proofreading. At proofreading stage, we don't accept major additions or corrections, no author corrections as they are called, but of course any typos, any technical errors, any broken links, anything technical coming up can and will and must be corrected in these page proofs. One final proof is then issued for indexing purposes, for example, in the case of a monograph or a collected essays volume. And on the basis of that, we go to press, between brackets. This can be the literal printing press, resulting in a paper book publication, or we can go to online publishing and putting the result on our publishing platform. These, in very broad lines, from start to end, this process will take between 9 months and a year, roughly. In very broad lines, of course, there's exceptions and there's specific agreements on all points, but in very broad lines, this is how a typical publication process would look like.
And we understand that the basic communication from Brepols to author and vice versa is important for the final publication or printing. Can you tell us anything about any language barriers or anything more technical in general that Brepols has to pay attention?
To start with, it is indeed important that we, myself and my colleagues whose job title is publishing manager, are in direct contact with the authors, the series directors, the producers, colleagues at Brepols, all people involved at some stage in this process. We don't work, so at Brepols, we don't work with an acquisition editor, for example. From start to end, in my case, I will be the contact person for all involved in one particular publication project, which could be different in different publishing houses. That's how we've organized our work. So I will be the one going to conferences. I will be meeting with you. I will be emailing you. I will be working with the printer, etc. As you have probably understood in the meantime, English is not my first language. We are in Belgium. We are in the northern part of Belgium, Flemish speaking. Now, Flemish or Dutch is a very minor language in the world and also in scholarship, in academics. That's why, unfortunately, we cannot accept any manuscript proposals in Flemish. We only, by tradition, nor in any other minor language between brackets, we only accept work in the big five, let's say, the big five international languages for scholarship in our fields, which are English, French, German, Italian, and Spanish. We pride ourselves in accepting all of these five. So in Sacris Erudiri, for example, which is our house journal closely linked to the Corpus Christianorum enterprise, you will find in one and the same issue, you will find articles, contributions in any of these five languages, which of course makes the editing and the production work more complex because different rules apply to different languages, also on the formal level, as you can imagine. to our regret, we cannot accept any contributions in Flemish, for example, nor in Greek, to name but one, or Catalan, or Portuguese, or any other language in which, of course, very interesting work is being done. But when given the choice, we will choose for English because, well, that's the way the world and the market work today. We accept the other languages. Over the past few decades, again, English has become really predominant in the history of Brepols, even of the past half century. We've moved away from French. French was very predominant before the year 2000, and we've moved towards, well, I'm not going to say almost exclusively, but English is very, very important as a language. Also as a language of communication between us. So sometimes I will find myself communicating with an author in a European country, and will both revert to English, not being our native language, because, well, that's the way things go.
Thank you for that, Bart. Very, very helpful to know these steps in the publishing process, and of course the technicalities before accepting a proposal, especially the language framework. Now, obviously, I guess many of our listeners would be interested in knowing this. What does a scholar need to know before they approach you, before they submit a proposal to you? Obviously, there are trends, and we are going to talk about trends in a bit. But approaching, obviously, a private publishing house, what does a scholar need to know in order to get their paper published?
I would say that it's very important, and many people do this, it's very important to imagine yourself in advance how your final publication will look like and who will be reading it. Because that's key. It's not because you've spent the last 5 years of your life on researching this or that topic that necessarily everyone else will be interested in the entire record of your researches and all the details and all. You need to imagine exactly how you will pitch your project. Pitch on a journal article level, for example, or monograph or a volume of collected essays. It's very important to have this in mind before. And actually, when in my first contacts, I sense there's something interesting in a project or a proposal, I always ask authors to explain me in 5 minutes what's it about and how it's going to change the field, the way people look at this or that topic or period or person. And most people can, of course, and that's a good start. That's the basis. From there, the topic needs to be discussed and defended, and arguments need to be added, etc., growing into an article or a monograph. But these 5 minutes are really key to the successful start of a project. If people do not manage to explain even to me what it is about they're going to publish about, that's not a very good start.
So let's talk about the trends that Yannis mentioned in Byzantine studies and what publishers look for today in 2025. Is there any trend that Brepols in particular, or in the academia today? Can you tell us more about it?
Definitely. There's several things we can add in this respect. First of all, to Brepols, text editions remain very important. So we still are a very text-based publishing house, let's say. There's also a number of full text databases, just to highlight these. But of course, not only at Brepols, not only in Byzantine studies, but all over the humanities, there's a lot of attention recently for other aspects, material culture, sigillography, numismatics, obviously, epigraphy. So we've moved. Texts have always been important and remain very important as sources, but luckily we've complemented this body with a number of other sciences, which were used to be called like secondary or ancillary sciences, but which have developed into fields of their own, proper fields of their own. So studies in these fields are trending. It's just because they are arriving at us now. Another thing, and I've just looked in the Brepols catalog of recent years. Another thing that struck me is that the word revisited pops up a number of times in titles, subtitles, in blurbs of books, meaning that even if we think that this or that topic has now been covered because a number of people have written about it over the past 50 years, let's say, there's always a new way of looking at this old material, often combining different disciplines, different methodologies, and people come up with new views on what we believed was already known. Of course, there's also new material, literally new material surfacing in archaeology, in manuscripts or libraries. So there is new sources to be explored, but it's mostly, I think, in the combination of existing material with new technologies, new methodologies, the linking of different fields. So, for example, there's a lot of recent attention for Venetian and Ottoman architecture in the Mediterranean, for example, or vice versa, Byzantine influences in the Balkans. Also, from our point of view, from the Brepols point of view, a very fruitful combination, I think, of two traditional fields, that is what is called the Latin East. So the presence of, for example, Western European church orders in Greece, in Byzantium after 1204. So these crossovers, these interdisciplinary projects and interests are, I think, what could be termed a trend. Other things are the interest for what used to be considered to be marginal aspects. For example, the interest, if we talk about architecture, in spolia, so the use of older parts in newer buildings, and combining a number of things I've just mentioned before. I've recently read a very interesting published article, so it's published in the meantime, about the use of spolia in the church built by William of Moerbeke in Ayatriada in the Argolith, where there's two notable ancient Roman marbles worked into the structure of a proper Byzantine church, albeit built by a Western chaplain, by a Dominican, to address his needs as a preacher in the Morea. So the combination of all of these relatively marginal, may I say, aspects into a new proper field of study. I would say that's something that's trending. That's something that's capturing the attention of people. So returning to my first question to an author, why do you think this is important, and who will want to know this? I think that's something, and that's also that makes it interesting for me as well, because I'm learning all the time, just doing my job. I'm learning from much more learned people what is happening in the world.
We have the new trends. I like what you said about all those areas where we see history overlapping, like Westerners in the East. Indeed, this, as a good example, it has been a trend. Recently, we've seen some very nice publications about Latinocratia, for example, and any other similar areas. I would like to ask you, Bart, looking ahead, which areas do you foresee that Brepols would be interested in publishing? We see lately, apart from revisiting, as you said, or publishing new primary sources, we've seen an interest in social history, a big interest in social history, which I think personally it's very helpful, an eye-opening trend, in my opinion. What do you foresee from your point of view?
Well, first of all, of course, we have to follow these trends. A publishing house will never introduce a new trend. We follow what's happening at our universities, at our centers for higher learning. When we see coming up things like you just mentioned, aspects of social history, we know that the manuscripts for publications on these will probably only reach us in a couple of years down the road. So that's why it's important for us. We are present at a number of conferences, big international venues, but also smaller, round tables or study days at various places around the globe, trying to monitor what's being said there. At Brepols, we know that if at all, these will probably crop up only in a couple of years, because there's a certain delay, as you can imagine, before they arrive at the state of publication. Another thing that's, of course, that cannot be ignored is the influence, the importance of the digital humanities, as they are called, AI now adding to that picture. Whatever creative ways scholars will find to apply these new methodologies to their sources, to their data, to their information, will result in new publications and will at some point also land on my desk. And then it will be to us to see if and how we can publish these without having to invent probably new methodologies also on the publication level, because, well, you don't publish a large research database just like that. Putting it online is not publishing. So it might be that these new developments will also change our work and the way we actually come to publishing and distributing the results of this research. It's already doing that, of course, but at the pace the humanities are changing as a field, we can predict that this will also have a big impact on publishing in a foreseeable future.
So I think we can all agree that a discussion about the pre-work or the publishing review between scholars, authors, and anyone interested in publishing and Brepols, we can talk more hours about it and be more detailed about it. But I think we have to mention what happens when we are in the final stage of a publication, or the author has published with Brepols. What's next between the relationship Brepols and the scholars that published, how they promote a certain publication?
My job title is publishing manager, as I told you, which means I'm like the middleman in the first part of this process between author, producers, but also with my colleagues at Brepols and from my colleagues in other departments, marketing, customer care, IT. We have a very large IT department, as you can imagine, in these days where digital publishing is of importance. The collaboration internally at Brepols on a given title or publication starts roughly 6 months before publication. So when we are well into the pre-production process, I will start sharing information with my colleagues, for example, in marketing in the first place, but also in production, because things have to be put in place to arrive at a publication. It's never good that at the moment of publication, at day one, at birth, no one in the world is waiting for your publication. So what we need to do is, starting a couple of months before the planned publication date, is starting to advertise your project, your title, your journal, whatever you're publishing with us. And this will be done in different media. This will be done by distributing catalogs and leaflets by mail or at conferences, for example. Of course, online marketing plays a big role in this. There's the Brepols website, there's the online catalog, there's all the social media. So we have a dedicated person in our marketing department who's following what's happening on social media, coming from academics, from institutes, and who's adding our own Brepols content to that discussion. This means that when the books are finally available in our warehouse and they are ready to be distributed all over the world, people are waiting, or should be waiting, for them. But because there again, it's important, remember my first question to any potential author, there again, it's important that whatever rolls from our presses, whatever comes out of our warehouse or is distributed online, answers an existing need. And if that need was not there when the author started her or his project, it's important that we tell people before what's happening, why it's important, and why they should read it or use it or ask their librarian to buy it. All of this, having the book finished by a certain date, having it announced in all the relevant and all the necessary media, making sure that journals have been contacted for review copies, for example, or for any other marketing purposes, book presentations, exhibitions, whatever the occasion is. All of this requires a big amount of collaboration internally at Brepols with my colleagues, but of course also with the author, who is probably the main player in the promotion or the auto-promotion of her book.
You mentioned the website of Brepols, and the truth is I have spent time with it, and I have to admit it's very user-friendly, and it has all these informations that you mentioned, and I think that anyone interested in publishing, just searching what's up in trending in Byzantine studies, or wants to see the work of Brepols, will find a piece of information, articles, the online catalog that will help him understand. But I have a key question. You mentioned that you communicate your work, but do you concentrate this promotion to academic community, to the general public? What's your outreach?
The customers of Brepols are almost exclusively institutional. There's not many private persons who actually acquire any publication for their private library. That has to do, of course, with the very specialized content, with the high prices, we have to admit it. But I hope in the meantime that you understand that these high prices also stand for something, that something is behind it. It means that we almost exclusively sell to libraries. So our main customers are libraries, librarians, or people responsible for the acquisition policy in the big institutional libraries all over the world. Of course, our readers, the users of this material, are in most part, again, the academic community that are also authoring these works, because we cater for a relatively limited circle, and in that circle, our authors, users, readers, there's a big overlap between them. So when we try to target individual people, when we come out to conferences and talk to people, it will be to academics, it will be to students, maybe to professors, to researchers that we will be talking. The idea is that they will then ask their librarian to purchase this or that title, to follow this or that series, to subscribe to this or that database. So it's a bit of a fragmented image, and while I, as a publishing manager, and my colleagues are mostly in direct contact with the scholars, my marketing colleagues are more in contact with the institutional audience. And so there again, you see the importance of putting things together and making sure that my network and my marketing colleagues' networks overlap and meet each other, because my researcher will go to his library and hope to find the title of his or her colleague.
How do you organize your promotion, your representation in the conference? Because I know it's linked with the conference and what it's going to be discussed in a conference. What can anyone find in a conference in the Brepols corner?
what we will do, there's a number of big conferences, annual or even with more years apart, that we will always go to. So you can imagine which these are. To these conferences, we will bring an overview. Necessarily has to be a small selection, of course, of all the things that are in the catalog. We will try to bring an overview of what we are doing in different fields. So going out to the North American Patristics Conference, there will be and Latin and Greek and Oriental languages, but also Christian archaeology, and you can imagine. This means that I will start making up a list. Other colleagues of mine who follow the fields of archaeology, for example, or who follow the fields of Oriental languages, while I only follow Latin and Greek, they will add their suggestions. Marketing will have a final look, and then most of the time we have to cut some lines because the place at a table is, of course, limited. But having a look at that table, for example, the same thing for when we go to the Society of Biblical Literature or American Academy of Religion or others, whoever has a look at the table should have, in short, a general view of what Brepols is doing. When going out to more specific conferences, like the Byzantine conference in Canterbury last summer, where Yanis and I met, there's probably only one publishing manager in charge. Going to the Byzantine conference would be my own responsibility. I would make the selection, of course, still confer with marketing to check if I haven't forgotten anything, if anything is forthcoming that is not physically on my desk and which I might have overlooked. Marketing has the broader overview of whatever is being announced at company level. Those selections will be more condensed, so to speak, and more appropriate to the actual, sometimes very, very specialized theme of the conference. Of course, what we always do in all cases is check who's speaking, who's delivering the keynote, for example, making sure that Brepols authors presenting at a conference will find their titles, their recent and relevant titles, of course, on the Brepols table. And something that we've noticed, and I've used the word auto-promotion before, authors are very, very willing to pose with a copy of their book in front of the Brepols flag or whatever at the Brepols table at a certain conference, for that picture to be uploaded to their own, but also to the Brepols social media. That's something that really appeals, I think, to any person's sense of doing important things, sense of contributing to the field. And authors are always very happy to find their titles on the table. That always gives rise to very pleasant situations.
And to mention to our listeners that we always include links related to the episode. So in this case, we have links to your website, and any related information will be included as well.
In the pre-recorded meeting, you mentioned a specific title that has a lot of interest to young scholars or any interested in Byzantine history. Can you tell us a bit more about it?
Yes, definitely. This is a recent publication. I think the book was published last autumn. And I'm talking about the memoirs by Dame Avril Cameron, whom all of your listeners will definitely know, at least by name. The book is called Transitions, and it's what the Germans call a piece of Fachgeschichte. So it tells the history of our field of Byzantine studies and how it developed over the final part of the 20th century and the first part of the first quarter of the 21st century. It has a lot of details, a lot of interesting, sometimes funny stories, sometimes dramatic stories. It's very well written. It teaches you something about the field we are all in. And it's a very pleasant literature. I've read it cover to cover myself for my pleasure, and I've given my copy away to someone to read it, because it's really something I can recommend, and it covers different aspects of what we've been talking about earlier.
I have to ask, what's in the future about an upcoming publication or conference. Do you have any plans? Can you share with us any upcoming publications or events?
This year is going to be a relatively busy year for me personally, traveling, almost being back at a pre-COVID level with a number of these big conferences, which are back on the agenda or probably have never really left the agenda. But by coincidence or not, I have the impression that many smaller conferences and days of study are being organized. So I'll be away from home quite a couple of times now. Admittedly, often to relatively small groups, catering to, just to name an example, the scholars of apocryphal literature, which touches on a number of fields that are close to us, but as such is of course a very specialized discipline in itself. When editors, volume editors, are really taking their editing job seriously, they don't just put proceedings of any given conferences in a volume and wish to publish that as the proceedings of the conference. When they take their editing job serious, the conference itself will be very condensed, have a clear line, be a unity in itself, and the resulting publication as well. Sometimes a well-edited volume of conference proceedings is very similar to a volume of collected essays, let's say. At Brepols, we very rarely commission books or articles, so we very seldomly actively go out and ask people to contribute on this or that topic. But what we really appreciate is when volume editors have this general picture, this larger picture in mind, and make sure that all the contributions, all the speakers on a conference are not necessarily on the same line, because of course discussion is key to any scholarly field. But in any case, that the resulting publication will give a solid overview of even a very specialized theme or a very obscure text or person, making the publication the go-to place for any scholar, any student, any professor, anyone in the world who wishes to enter in this topic. And by coincidence, a number of conferences in this line are taking place this summer, mostly. And then I try to be there from the start. Because I see an interesting publication coming out of that. We have been in contact with these people before, so any contributors to the conference have in mind that their contribution should end up in a Brepols publication. The editor, the convener, who will also be the editor of the volume, is in contact with me. We are on the same line. I find it important to be there from the start, to meet the people, to actually go there, sit and listen, maybe ask questions during the session, or more commonly between sessions or at meals. As to any forthcoming publications, my main responsibility is still the Latin series of the Corpus Christianorum, with the Greek series, the Series Graeca, as a second component, but much smaller component next to that. Every single year, our ambition is to publish, together myself and two colleagues, to publish around 10 editions in the different series of the Corpus Christianorum over the year. Of course, this organizes my agenda in a certain way, because these editions are always in the background. There's always something happening. Before coming to this online meeting, I was preparing the table of contents for a forthcoming volume now. There's always something to be done in one or other Corpus Christianorum edition. So that's really the backbone of my year. And by the end of the year, and so that people know, the Brepols year ends on the 31st of March, which means that now in end January, we are in the final stages of the bookkeeping year, and any publication that needs to be published before the 31st of March is on my desk now is urgent now, because it has to be printed, bound, distributed, sent. This is the backbone of my year, and then the peaks are the conferences, the meetings we have with people around Europe and North America mostly. Although we also go further afield, and Brepols even has an office in Adelaide, Australia, to cover the Pacific part of the theater. Just to give an example, we also have offices in France, in the UK, in the United States, and in Greece, in Thessaloniki.
Is there any time you started thinking returning in the position of the author? You keep up with the trends. You know how Brepols sees the trends and translates them into publications. You know what Brepols is interested in. Have you mentioned returning in this process, but the opposite side, from the perspective of the author?
Yes, definitely. Very good question. It's always tempting, because, as I said before, I am very close to what's happening in my field, in our field, and I know some people from my own time at university, and I've made many more friends and met people since then. Amazingly, my PhD dissertation was published by Brepols, but before I joined the company. So that was maybe the first link, in tempore non suspecto, at that time. But so that's on my list. Since then, I've contributed to a number of publications, because sometimes collaboration becomes so tight between an author and a publishing manager that in the end you start by helping someone and adding and contributing and alerting people to other existing projects, or because as you said, we are sort of in the middle of the web. And this collaboration sometimes ends in like a co-authorship. So I've been contributing to a number of volumes and articles. It's always tempting. Of course, it's not my job. Whatever I do in that respect, if it goes beyond the boundaries of what Brepols expects of me, it should be done in my free time. And well, time is limited, as we all know. So maybe less than I would have liked, but still I've been able to contribute to quite a number of interesting publications. And again, coincidence or not, this year there's 2 or maybe 3 of such projects ongoing, where I might or might not end up as a co-author, but in any case I'm more closely involved, also privately, in the work of one of my authors / colleagues. So it's a thin line, and it's also true. This is not a coincidence, of course, because it's true that the Brepols hiring strategy has always been for the functions of not only publishing managers, but also the people in marketing, for example, in customer care, even in the administration, and to a certain level in IT, to hire people who come from the field, who are in one way or another, who have in one way or another been active in academia. I have a number of colleagues holding PhDs, which is not a requirement for any Brepols position, but because we are always looking for people who know what they're talking about and who are able to converse with scholars at a certain high level and interpreting and asking them the right questions. It so turns out that a number of people in my office have PhDs, and all of them are in one or other way trained in history, philology, art history, the fields Brepols is strong at.
Thank you for saying that, and this is very not only very interesting, but very good for listeners to know. We are leading a period, and especially for the users of LinkedIn. If you look at LinkedIn, you will see so many PhD graduates who write about the struggle to find a job outside of academia, and it's good to know that the years we spent and we invested in research and in learning how to write properly, and obviously publishing, because someone who does PhD apparently knows how to publish, because it's a requirement, not by default, but it happens. You learn it. So it's good to know that there are people out there who want to hire, who appreciate those skills, and who want to hire PhD graduates. Coming to our final question for the day. I would like to ask you, you mentioned something while we were talking about the trends, you mentioned AI, and I really want to ask you, what are your final thoughts about the future of Byzantine studies and publishing? We are leading a period with many changes. What are your thoughts on our future?
Talking about AI specifically, I'm not an expert, obviously, but we do have the experts. We have a very large IT department who are interested and more versed in these technological methods than I am, but who are also looking at and working with authors and project leaders to see how their research results can be translated, so to speak, towards a larger audience. We have today in the office, we have people working actively on AI in the humanities. We also use AI, of course, whenever there's something I don't like pretty much doing myself, like reviewing and adjusting a blurb for a book cover, for example. Again, keeping in mind that English is not my native language and most of our titles are in English, the quality of language control at the author's side, at the series director's side, but also at the publisher's side is, of course, very important. We don't want to publish any books with like pidgin English on the back cover. We have a number of English-speaking, of native English colleagues in the offices around the world. But these days, I myself and my colleagues make an intelligent use of whatever tools are available, AI being one of them. We use AI in an intelligent way, I said. Of course, there's always the human intellect who has to understand and verify the result and make sure it fits with the purpose, it fits with what we want to do. I think AI is in very general terms, is a very powerful tool also for academic studies. But I come back to my initial question to any potential author, really. What I'm looking for, what the publishing house is looking for, is the creative, intelligent, human way of looking at a question or a problem or a topic or a person. I'm not sure, maybe I'm wrong, or maybe this is still changing, but I wonder if even AI will ever be able to tell me in 5 minutes or in 2 sentences why this or that topic is worth publishing, and do it in a convincing way, in a way where you say, okay, this is high quality, this is well said, this is thought over, this is what I want to read as a reader, what I want to publish as a publisher. It will always be important, I believe, for the author, for a person, to be able to grab that and transmit it to me to start with, and to our audience in general, and in the end, at the end of the process. I might be proven wrong, maybe in a couple of years, or maybe today, I'm not even sure. AI would be able to answer this question convincingly, but I still have my doubts. Not about the AI as a tool, as a methodology, as a way of asking broad questions to large amounts of data, but the human element and the human intellect, I think remains key to, and I hope remains key to a publication that's worth publishing and worth reading.
Bart, thank you so much for joining us today. I have to say, we really appreciate it. We know how busy you are this period, especially coming towards the end of the publishing year for Brepols. And thank you so much for being in such an amazing place. What a lovely background. Sadly, our listeners cannot see it, but that's an amazing library we see behind you. I guess it fits the role and the topic we talk about today. Thank you so much for your time and for accepting our invitation.
Thank you for having me.